There was another chirp from above her. She squinted up to see Gilbert navigating his way back down to her, head first. "I'm okay," she muttered, as Gilbert crept up her arm and gently prodded her cheek with his snout, just a little further. She took a deep breath and started to climb again, one sweaty hand over the other, until she finally dragged her body over the top rung and lay panting on the blissfully horizontal wooden ledge behind the clock face. Up close, the tick and tock were so loud it seemed to reverberate through Echo's bones. Gilbert cocked an inquiring eye at her, and she pushed open the little door and crawled out to the bracket beneath the clock face. "How do we open it, Gilbert?" Echo knelt and pulled at the rim, but it didn't budge. Could the map really be inside? Perhaps this wasn't the answer after all. Gilbert ran up her arm and peered at the clock too, then shook his head and curled his tail into a question mark. He leaped lightly onto the minute hand of the clock, as the hand crept up to 12 and began its descent again. Gilbert's weight forced it forward with a clicking sound. "That's it." Echo tickled the little lizard under the chin. "That was the final part of the clue. Face up to me and hold my hand, a true and quarter place to land." She grinned and gently turned the hour hand to 3. There was a gentle grinding of machinery. For inside, as something slipped into place, "That's the trio. Now for the quarter." She scooped Gilbert off the minute hand and turned it to 3 as well. Echo held her breath as, with a click, the clock face swung silently open. Inside was a dark chamber. Echo peered in, but she couldn't see anything. If only she had the glow jar. She reached in blindly, half expecting to find spiders, webs, or worse. But the inside of the cavity was cool and smooth as a glass under a fine layer of dust. Embottled, Echo reached in further until finally her fingers closed over something wrapped in paper. But what was it? It was no map, that was for sure. She pulled the little package out. It fitted comfortably in her palm, the palm of her hand, and was solid and weighty. She swung the clock face closed and sat on a ledge to examine what she found. It was wrapped in crumbled brown parchment and tied with string. Gilbert jumped lightly onto her shoulder and cocked an inquiring eye as she fumbled to untie the knots. But when she finally peeled off the parchment wrapper, her heart sank with disappointment. It wasn't the map at all, but an old silver pocket watch, mottled and tarnished with age. "This isn't a map," she said, her voice almost breaking into sobs as she glanced at the clock face again. "Only half a bell till noon. What are we doing? What are we going to do?" Gilbert ran down her arm and raced over to the discarded parchment. He grabbed it between his jaws and dragged it back. "What are you doing?" "That's just—" "Oh." Echo scrubbed her tears away with her sleeve and picked up Gilbert and the parchment paper in delight as she saw the outlines, faded outlines, but outlines all the same, on the inside of the paper. "That is the map, Gilbert. We found it." Hooray! Chapter 17. The clock gave a loud bong that startled Echo so much she almost toppled off the edge she was balancing on. "Young lady, please hurry," Duran called from far below on the library floor. It would be the high tide at any moment. High tide. Echo still didn't know quite what the librarian meant or why it was so important, but she could hear the worry in his voice. Whatever it was urgent, and she had a deadline to meet too. "Coming," she yelled. She moved the parchment and the pocket watch into her knapsack, put out an arm for Gilbert to leap onto, and made her way back down the rotary ladder, half climbing and half slithering to the library floor. As she jumped down from the last rung, she found herself splashing into a puddle. Oh, mercy me, the stacks. The librarian leaped onto the tricycle and pedaled off through the water to the bank of wheels. He began spinning them frantically. As he did so, the bookshelves revolving on their axis again and disappeared into the ground. And only just in time, as foamy waves of clear sea water came surging across the library floor. "Quick to the exit," he panted. as the final shelf clanked into position and Echo found herself in the center of a vast, open, shelfless library. The librarian pedaled away with Echo splashing after him, Gilbert clinging on tightly to her shirt sleeve. The water was soon ankle deep and perfectly clear with just an odd piece of seaweed or a crab or stray book floating on its surface. As the water reached Echo's knees, it became harder and harder to run or even walk. Even the librarian had to stop the tricycle, but the exit still seemed miles away across the huge atrium. "How high does the water get?" panted Echo. "Right to the top," said Grundy. "You will have to jump on the back." Echo stared for a moment at the little red bicycle. Then she shook her head in disbelief and got on. He pulled a cord on the tricycle's framework. With a whoosh, 3 balloons inflated around the wheels, and Echo's let out a yelp as a little tricycle or hovercraft or whatever it was bobbed up on the surface of the water. "Right, let's get you to the exit," said the librarian. "Usually I have visitors out before high tide. This is completely against protocol." He made a pedal towards the far end of the hall, away from the ventral shaft. "I came in that way," said Echo, pointing back towards the stairway. "I see." Grunt raised one white eyebrow and spun the tricycle round. There was one defining roar from behind them. "Hold on," shouted the librarian. "Sounds like a big Echo gripped his waist and turned to see a huge white crested wave, as tall as a house, surging towards them. She squeezed her eyes shut and held on tight as they were thrown forward, water slapping them, foam soaking their clothes and plastering her hair to her head. She held her breath as they were buffeted about, but then the wave carried them forward at an alarming pace. Echo swat out seawater and dragged her hair from her eyes to see the long, lit railed balcony, now at sea level, up ahead. With one final burst of speed, the librarian pedaled the tricycle forward and landed on the balcony. "You'll need to hurry," he said, dismounting, "but I've got something for you before you go." He reached into his gown and drew out a small blue rectangle. "Your library card. Should you ever need the services of Aquapilla Vault, you are now a member." "Thank you." Echo took the card and carefully stowed it in her knapsack. "And some jelly beans for the journey," said Grunt. "I find them very useful on adventures." Echo grinned. Then another roar of surging water sounded. "Now hurry," said the librarian. Echo shoved the jelly beans in her knapsack and raced off up the balcony towards the ventilation shaft. "Bye," she yelled over her shoulder, "and thank you again." That's it, Grace. We'll find out what happens next chapter. Bye, night.